Dennis Rader, better known as the BTK killer, an acronym for Bind, Torture, Kill, was one of the most calculating and terrifying serial killers in American history. For 3 decades, Rader tormented the Wichita, Kansas community, killing 10 people while taunting police and the media with cryptic letters. His ability to blend into normal life as a family man and church leader only added to the horror of his double life as a brutal murderer. Born on March 9, 1945 in Pittsburgh, Kansas, Dennis Rader had a relatively uneventful childhood. By all accounts, he appeared to be an ordinary boy, although he would later confess to having violent sexual fantasies as early as childhood. Rader claimed that even as a young boy, he fantasized about binding, torturing, and killing women. These dark thoughts continued into adulthood, forming the foundation of his later crimes. Rader served in the U.S. Air Force and eventually settled in Wichita, where he worked for a home security company, an ironic job given his future exploits. He married and had 2 children, all while hiding his dark desires from those closest to him. To everyone who knew him, Dennis Rader was a kind neighbor, a loving father, and an active member of his local church, where he served as a deacon. But behind this facade was a cold-blooded killer. Rader's reign of terror began on January 15, 1974, with the brutal murder of the Otero family. He broke into their home and methodically killed all 4 family members: Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and their 2 young children, Josephine and Joseph Jr. He bound, tortured, and strangled each of them, later admitting that he derived sexual pleasure from the experience. The Otero family massacre shocked the Wichita community, but no one had any idea who was responsible, or that the killer had only just begun. Over the next several years, Rader continued to strike, claiming more victims in a similar fashion. His victims were typically women whom he stalked and selected based on their vulnerability. Once inside their homes, Rader would bind his victims, torture them, and ultimately kill them by strangulation or suffocation. His killings were methodical, and he always left behind signs of the control and sadism that defined his fantasies. But Rader's craving for recognition was as powerful as his desire to kill. He began sending taunting letters to the police and local media, taking credit for the murders and giving himself the name BTK. In these letters, he detailed the grisly nature of his crimes and challenged authorities to catch him. He enjoyed playing a game of cat and mouse with law enforcement, knowing that he had the upper hand. In one particularly chilling letter, he wrote, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper or some national attention?" His desire for notoriety was insatiable. Despite his need for attention, Rader was surprisingly meticulous about covering his tracks. He avoided leaving fingerprints, wore gloves, and planned his attacks carefully. His understanding of law enforcement procedures helped him elude capture for years. As the murders continued, Wichita lived in fear, knowing the BTK killer was still out there, but having no idea who he was. For over a decade, the BTK killer seemed unstoppable until 1988, when Rader suddenly went quiet. For nearly 15 years, there were no more murders and no more letters. Many began to believe that BTK had either died or been imprisoned for an unrelated crime. In reality, Rader had simply gone dormant. His need to kill was suppressed, though the fantasies never left him. It wasn't until 2004, a full 30 years after his first murder, that Dennis Rader re-emerged. He couldn't resist the urge to regain the spotlight. He sent a new letter to the media, reigniting the investigation. Over the next several months, Rader sent several more letters, taunting police once again and bragging about his past murders. However, Rader's ego proved to be his downfall. In one of his letters, he asked the police if they could trace a floppy disk back to him if he sent one. The police, of course, assured him they couldn't, so Rader, confident in his superiority, sent a disk containing metadata that led police directly to him. It was traced to the Christ Lutheran Church, where Rader served as a respected member. The final piece of evidence came from DNA testing on a PAP smear taken from Rader's daughter, which confirmed that Dennis Rader was, in fact, the BTK killer. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested. Under interrogation, he calmly confessed to the murders, showing no remorse. He even provided detailed accounts of each killing, explaining how he had stalked, bound, tortured, and killed his victims. His methodical and emotionless demeanor shocked investigators. In court, Rader's true nature was on full display. He described his crimes with chilling detachment, recounting how he would project his fantasies onto his victims, viewing them not as people, but as objects for him to control and kill. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The story of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, is one of the most terrifying examples of a man living a double life. To his family and community, he was an upstanding citizen, but beneath the surface lurked a sadistic killer who thrived on control, pain, and death. His ability to evade capture for so long, while actively taunting police, makes his story one of the most chilling in modern criminal history.